Hello, everyone. Welcome to this skills training webinar for the Rebath sales system being presented by David Hoffeld. As you have read in the Franchise First emails and seen on Fran Connect's top stories, and for the Phase 1 group of RB Academy, this webinar will train on Part 2 of how to compellingly present the second half of the contractor section and obtain a commitment from the customer that they do not want a contractor. So at this time, let me introduce David Hoffeld.
Thank you, Wendy. And thank you to all of you who are joining us live today as we talk about a really important topic that we addressed partially last month in our webinar, looking at the contractor option. And if you recall from last month, as we looked at this option, we focused on a couple different things. First, we talked about limited design guidance, what that means, and how the contractor really doesn't help you design your bathroom. They kind of just are focused on the installation of whatever you choose. And why is that a problem? Well, people often make choices they later regret when they have to figure out design on their own. And we also talked about product quality, how often the options that the contractor has access to regarding products set you up for future water damage issues and for future hassles and problems. And then we also talked about how to address the important topic of time. And this is a powerful one, looking at people remodeling the bathroom themselves, how to position that in a way that helps them realize the excessive amount of time that will often take. Also, having a contractor remodel their bathroom, how that can have weeks of people in and out of their home and how disruptive that is to their lifestyle. And then also having limited to no access to the bathroom for that period of time as it's being remodeled for potentially weeks. And we talked about how to identify pain and ask high value second level questions that help you identify the pain that will cause those homeowners and guide them in seeing how the general contractor option isn't a good fit. But that was last month. Today, we are going to focus on the final two big components of the contractor section and how to present them compellingly and highly effectively. And then we're going to talk about how do we leverage that buying criteria that we established in the inspection and help them understand what do they want for their bathroom and how do they want their new bathroom and that experience in the remodel and post-remodel to be different than they currently have experienced. And so we've already done that. So how do we bring that back up and use that to kill this option? We're going to talk about all that. So let's just jump right into it and talk about the next component of the general contractor that comes after excessive time, which is cost. Now, this is something that as soon as you bring it up, your potential customer is going to be all ears, right? Because they have been wanting to talk about cost since you walked in the door, and you're going to address it. And before we talk about the exact verbiage to use that you can begin to deploy today if you're already not, I want to talk about what is the purpose of the cost section. Why are we even talking about cost here? And there really is a singular purpose, and it's this. The goal is to create what behavioral scientists call an anchor. I want to cover this real quickly, real briefly, because if you don't understand this, the cost section will always be, hard to execute it correctly because you don't understand what you're trying to accomplish in the execution, and the why helps illuminate the how. So let's talk about it real briefly. An anchor is what's going to help our homeowners understand later on when we show them the price for Rebath at the end of the presentation, whether that price is a good price or a bad price, fair or unfair. How do homeowners know that? They use what's called anchors. Now, what are anchors? They're reference points our brains naturally create to help us make a judgment and reduce uncertainty, right? Our brains do not like uncertainty. We don't like risk. We assign a high level of risk to a buying decision. We usually don't make it, or if we do, we toss and turn all night and we don't feel good about it, and sometimes we cancel, right? Same is true with our customers. So the anchor is how, when you show price, your potential customers are going to be able to say, that's a good price, or a bad price, a fair price or an unfair price. The way their brains will make that determination, that judgment, is they'll compare your price to an anchor. So anchors are at play whether we realize it or not. So we can, you can forget the webinar and forget about the anchoring idea. It's still at play. So this science just simply discloses the reality of what's happening. And knowing that matters because it now allows us to address this very proactively. Because anchors are determining the perception of price on every sales call you run. Every single time. You and I have never been on a sales call where price was shown, whether as a salesperson or a consumer, and an anchor did not determine how we view the price that we showed or were being shown. So anchors are here. So we can either, put our hands over our eyes and pretend like they don't exist and hope that something good happens, or we can proactively address them. So what does that look like? Our brains use an anchor as a starting point, and then they contrast that price with it. So very, very impactful. In fact, let's make this real practical as we talk about the application. Anytime you hear a response when you show price at the end of the rebath presentation, like that's too expensive, or wow, that's a lot more than I thought it would be. Why are they saying that? Because they are comparing your price to a low anchor, and they're saying, well, that's a problem. Now, the good news is if we know what we're trying to do in the cost section, address the anchor. If someone has a low anchor, we can move it or give them a new one to focus on. So why does that matter? This man you see on your screen is probably the greatest living cognitive psychologist in the world right now. He won in 2002 the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences for his work in identifying what we call heuristics, which are little rules our brains follow when forming choices. Anchoring is one of them. So these are not small things. These are big deals, right? That can have life-changing results. And anchors are extremely influential. Let me give you an example of one that I think will be easy to remember and illustrates the point well. It happened many years ago on the old Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And Johnny Carson brought on a young girl who had just been awarded for selling the most Girl Scout cookies ever. And he brought her on and he asked her a good question. He said, so how do you sell these Girl Scout cookies? You sell more than anyone else. Like, try to sell me some Girl Scout cookies. Let me hear your pitch. And she said, okay. And she said to Johnny, would you like to make a $30,000 donation to the Girl Scouts? And he looked at her surprised and said, no. And then she said, well, will you at least buy 2 boxes of Girl Scout cookies? And of course, he chuckled and laughed and nodded his head. And she said, that's what I would do. I would walk up to everyone and I would say, would you make a $30,000 donation to the Girl Scouts? They all would say no. And then I would say, well, will you at least buy 2 boxes of cookies? And almost everyone said yes. Now, what was that little girl doing? She was leveraging what we now know as anchors. In other words, real simply, she asked someone for $30,000. Okay, and this is a number of decades ago, so that's a lot of money today. It was even more back then. Everyone said no, but she created a $30,000 anchor. And then when she retreats to just 2 boxes of cookies, everyone says, oh, thank God. Yeah, that's fine. 2 boxes, sure, I'll take 2, no problem. Right? Why was that so persuasive and so effective? Because she leveraged an anchor. She stumbled onto something, and that's why she sold more Girl Scout cookies than anyone else had ever done, and why she was on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. So that's what anchors do. Let me give you an interesting case study, and then we'll do a poll, and then we'll talk about applying this, because I want to make sure we really get this. I want to apply this to this scenario. Imagine that you get a call from a friend this evening, and he says to you, I need your help. You've been in sales. I want to get your advice. I just started working at a men's store, and I'm trying to get people come in. They want, a new suit. Often they need a shirt and a tie, but I want to get the highest average sale price. So what should I show first? I can only show one at a time, the suit, the shirt, or the tie. Which one should I show first? What should I show second? What should I show third? Looking at it through the lens of anchoring, which is really the only way to answer this question accurately, and hopefully this is a softball if you've been paying attention. I want to ask you, what would you recommend? So let me give you 4 options here, and then we'll take a little poll. Which should you show first to get the highest sale? The suit, the shirt, the tie, or whatever you show first really doesn't impact buying behavior. So 4 options. Wendy, how can our participants vote on which one they think will be the best choice for their friend to get the highest sale? All right, so Wendy's having a few audio problems, but no worries. There is the poll on the screen, just you can see it right now. Choose what you think is the best response, and then we'll review them here. We'll give you a moment to do that. All right. And everyone was paying attention and they got the answer absolutely correct. Right, the suit is the right answer. It's the most expensive option. Oftentimes, when I ask that question or give that example prior to going into anchors, people will talk about the canvas, and some people say the shirt, some people say the tie, some will say the suit. Usually, surprisingly, the answers are pretty mixed. But once you know about anchoring, as all of you rightly did, the answer is extremely obvious. And so, why is that? I want to give you a quote from a very well known social psychologist named Robert Cialdini, who said this way. He said, "It's much more profitable for salespeople to present the expensive item first, not only because to fail to do so will lose the influence of the contrast principle." He's referencing anchors there. To fail to do so will also cause the principle to work actively against them. Presenting an inexpensive product first and following with an expensive one will cause the expensive one to seem even more costly as a result. Spot on, right? If you start with the tie, let's say for, I don't know, $80, okay? And then the shirt for 150 and then the suit for 1,000, right? When you go that way, it seems much more expensive versus the suit for 1,000, $150 shirt, adding that on, sure, why not? And then the $80 tie, no big deal, right? It skews our perception one way or the other. So this is very impactful. So let's talk about it, and we'll talk about how do we deal with some difficult cases as well. As we introduce the cost section to set this anchor, we want to start by saying it this way. How much would it cost to have a general contractor with 30 years of experience, impeccable references, fully licensed, insured, and bonded, gut the bathroom to the studs, and replace everything with new high quality materials, right? I want to present a lot of value there. So now think about who I'm describing realistically with those bullet points there, check marks. I'm talking about rebath, right? But I don't want to say, how much do you think it would cost to have a general contractor remodel your bathroom? I don't know, 5, 6 grand. How much would it cost to have a general contractor remodel your bathroom with 30 years of experience, impeccable references, fully licensed, bonded, and insured? And let's say they got the bathroom to the studs and replace everything with new high quality materials. That sounds expensive. I don't know. 12 grand, 13 grand, right? The same person will give you a different number. And so that starting number matters. Why? It's our anchor, right? It tells us where they're at. And so we need to see, are we close? So we want to kind of prime them or prepare them to give a good anchor. So you want to make sure you're asking this question, building a lot of value in it, not just saying, how much does it cost to have a general contractor remodel in your bathroom? Because if you do that, you'll get a low number. And we don't want a low number. We want a high number. And so lay it out like that. If you do, you should be, 10, 15, can't even have $20,000. On average, I found from data across the country, people saying this, because I've taught this for quite a while, a number of years. Usually you get 12, 13, 10, 15, 16, it depends if you say it like I'm advocating. Then what we want to do is go into this slide, talking about the cost versus value report, right? We compare that in this script, you'll see, compared to Kelley Blue Book. Why do we do that? it gives us a reference point, right? Everyone knows what Kelley Blue Book is, about how you find out what your car is worth. And so it boosts the credibility and it connects it to something they already trust. And then we want to further enhance the Cost versus Value magazine by saying it's referenced by Consumer Reports. Realtors use it, Money Magazine. And if you ever watch a lot of home improvement shows, and on the screen they'll say the average kitchen costs this, the average bathroom costs this, where do they get that number? They get it right from Remodeling Magazine's Cost versus Value report. And like, oh, okay, yeah, I've seen that, right? So I'm building the value of it. This will help you get buy-in to what you're going to share with them. So you don't just say, well, we don't have to guess. Remodeling Magazine has done all the work for us. We know exactly what things cost. Let me show you those numbers right now. And they'll be like, oh, all right. Do they trust Remodeling Magazine? I don't know. Some of them might know what it is. Most of them will have no clue, and they don't care. So you have to help them care and build the value. Referencing Kelley Blue Book, something almost everyone can relate to, and then referencing Consumer Reports. Many of your potential customers will leverage Consumer Reports, and so there's a high level of trust there. Realtors, Money Magazine, and the home improvement shows. And this is the slide we use. We talk about what the bathroom addition cost, and then also the remodeling. We do an upscale, and then we also do a regular one. And again, we're showing these numbers to really create anchors, right? So let's say they thought that a bathroom would cost $5,000 because that's what they paid 20 years ago, right? These people, we meet them all the time that's saying this. Well, that's their anchor. So if I don't address that, whatever price you show them at the end of the presentation, they're going to compare to $5,000, and then they're going to tell you probably no, and you're way overpriced. So I have to address that, and I do it right here. And so I'm going to slap them with reality of what things actually cost today. And I'm going to use some big numbers, and we're going to talk about how to handle this if anything negative happens in a moment. But I want to create an anchor so that when you show them the price, they're like, wow, that's a lot less than I thought it'd be. I never want to hear anyone say that's more than I thought it'd be, because that tells me that we missed them somewhere. We didn't create the anchor effectively. And so that's a problem, right? And so let's talk about this and what that looks like. So after I run through these, which is really simple, it's in your script and in videos, you just share the numbers on the screen. You want to ask them, is your bathroom remodel an upscale remodel or a regular bathroom remodel? And most of the time, not always, but most of the time they'll go, oh yeah, it's a regular one. All right. So where have they put themselves? What bucket have they went to? Well, the $18,546 bucket, right? So now we've given them a new anchor, right? And so that's the anchor they're going to compare you to, right? And this was also for those products that have low quality, limited design guidance from the contractor, and excessive amounts of time to install and hassle. So they're like, wow, that's a lot of money for all the kind of things I don't really want, right? So we're leveraging that. We're creating that anchor. Now let's talk about some issues that could arise, because this happens when you're in the home. What do you do if buyers have a very low anchor, right? Like I just mentioned a moment ago, they have a $5,000 anchor and they're like, I'm thinking that's going to cost like $5,000. Okay. Then you have to, slap them with reality. You leverage, you build the value of the cost versus value report, as I mentioned how to do that. Then you show them the numbers. And let's go back. You're going to start here with the bathroom addition. Now, why in the world would you talk about an addition when people don't care? I don't want an addition. Why are you showing me this? And you should know why. I want to create an anchor, right? And so I got to disrupt whatever numbers they have in their head. So I'm going to say, well, let's start with what you can do. Option one is an addition. Now, if you do that with a regular bathroom remodel, it's $43,232 for an addition. An upscale is north of $81,000. No, it doesn't sound like that's something you're interested in, though. You're not going to add on a bathroom to your house. Oh, no way. Okay, so you'd be more in just a remodeling. So let's look at those numbers, right? But what have I done? Now they're going to compare the remodeling cost to the addition cost, right? And if you think this doesn't work, you're in the majority. Whenever they do studies on anchors, there are two things that always happen on every single study, and there's thousands. Number one, They always work 100% of the time. And number two, everyone vastly underestimates their impact every time. People who are influenced by the anchor, and it's, I mean, clear evidence of causality, clear differences, clear evidence that they were influenced, will always deny that they were influenced, which makes it covertly persuasive, which is the best kind of persuasive when no one knows it's happening and everyone naturally denies something that's occurring. And so that's what's happening with anchors. So they are extremely impactful, right? These are like pilots when they fly a plane, they look at their instruments because sometimes their perceptions can be off, but the instruments are always accurate. In sales, these scientific principles are our instruments we look at because sometimes our perceptions are not always accurate, but their instruments are. So if they have a low anchor, we have to address that now or fight it later. And if you follow the process that I just shared with you, you're going to move their anchor. So if they start at 5,000, by the time you're done with this, they're going to move up, guaranteed. What do you do if they're only considering, a tub or shower, and you're showing them these large remodeling numbers of a whole bathroom? What do? You back off. So if you see that they're only considering, right, just a tub replacement and walls, and they're very budget conscious, what I do is I still go through exactly how I just demonstrated it, except then I say, if I see them starting to get, nervous, like, oh, wow, I don't think we can do anything like $18,000, Now, I should mention that this is for a full bathroom remodel. I know you're only looking at doing just the tub area, so it'll be less than that, but I just wanted to show you what the entire thing cost. Oh, okay. Good. So I back off the numbers. What does that do? It calms them down, but rest assured, all the data shows the anchor remains. The 18,000 is still there. It's still in their mind, and it's still that comparison point they're going to use. So back off and readjust. Say that was for a whole bathroom. We're only focusing on the tub area. It'll be much less, but I wanted to show you what everything costs. They'll go, oh, okay, good. The anchor is still created. My objective has been achieved. And if they're skeptical of the numbers you share, look at your presentation. Most likely, you're not building the value of the cost versus value report, meaning you're just saying, as I mentioned earlier, here it is. No, you want to talk about Kelley Blue Book and talk about everyone who leverages it, right? Leveraging that principle called social proof, right? That a lot of people, realtors, HGTV, right? Money Magazine, Consumer Reports, all leverage the cost versus value report. And so that way they're going to be like, well, they'll feel stupid not embracing it. And so they should, because it's a very reliable, accurate report, right? So very simple. So you want to practice this to make sure you execute it well. But let's go on to the last point in the general contractor, which is the warranty and post-install service. Real simple presentation for this. What do? You use what's called a superlative, and then you're going to ask two questions and share a story. That's the whole thing. So the superlative is this right here. The number one reason why people are shying away from this option is because of what happens after the remodel. So it's a provocative statement, right? Grabs their attention, and they're like, okay. And then you're going to ask them two questions. How long does the average contractor guarantee his or her work for? Most people will say things like, I don't know, 6 months. Do they even have a guarantee? I have no clue. Then you say, well, in our state, most states, this is true. If they're licensed, bonded, and insured, they have to guarantee the workmanship for 1 year. Oh, okay. Sounds good. How long is the average manufacturer's warranty for? People will say, well, looking around Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, I saw a couple years, 6 months, 3 years, something like that. Yeah. It can be as short as 6 months, can be as long as 5 years. But the average is usually 1 to 3, depending on product quality. And they'll go, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? Now what I'm ready to do is go into a story. Because I got to show them how the question they just answered sets them up for problems. Here's what I do. We go into a powerful third-party story. Before we do that, I want to share with you a little about third-party stories real quickly so that you can create them on your own. I'm going to share with you one that I would use on every sales call, but I want you to learn how to create your own third-party stories as well so that you can get a whole palette of stories that you can deploy whenever necessary. So why does this matter? Our brain thinks in terms of stories, right? Stories are powerful. A lot can be said about this. A lot of people in business right now, not just sales, are using stories because the data is so conclusive. We interpret stories different than we do statements of fact. It evokes emotional responses, which is why, like, for example, movies can make you cry, make you laugh, make you feel something. Why that data doesn't? Why is that? Our brains process it in really interesting ways. And when you tell a third party story correctly, people actually put themselves in the place of the character in the story. Stories also have very high retention rates. It releases dopamine in our brains and it helps us remember things. In fact, one study found that when presenters told stories, those stories were remembered 63% of the time by the audience when tested later on, in comparison to when they use very provocative facts instead of a story, remembered only 5% of the time. And in really powerful things, when you tell stories a certain way, when you hook people up to fMRI machines that measure brain activity, really interesting. The people's brains, the teller and the receiver, mirror one another, their brain activity. So it is really, really compelling. If you want to get more into the science of stories, check out our virtual learning that you all have access to, or in my book, I have about half a chapter on stories. Really neat. But real quickly, the point of telling stories is when you tell them effectively, which we're going to talk about exactly how to do in just a second, people recreate the stories in their mind. And the easier it is for buyers to picture a story, the more likely it is they'll be influenced by it. And this is a game changer when it comes to how we tell stories. Science has revealed this, that when people can recreate the story in their mind, they remember it, and they're more likely to be persuaded by it. So, how do you do this? 5 rules for telling really persuasive stories. And then I'm going to share with you the story that I would highly recommend you use. But these rules will help you create stories anytime you want. First, compelling introduction. You got to grab their attention. Second, dialogue. When you're having characters in your story, which we almost always do in sales, don't just say it like a narrator. Actually let the characters talk. Quote them. Remove any unnecessary or distracting information from the stories. Don't try to get fancy or cute with your stories. It distracts away from the point of them. So many examples I could give to this, but we'll just stick for now. Don't do it. Have a clear conclusion that ends the story. And then what does the story mean? After you tell the story in a sales call, when you should have a 1 to 2 sentences max at the end of the story where you tell them what the story means. Meaning, we're not just telling stories to tell stories. We're trying to convey an idea or a point. And stories are a really effective way to do that. So tell them what it means. So let's see all these lived out in the story that you have access to in your scripts and in all the videos. And I'm going to share with you right now. So you've gone through, you've done the superlative, then you've asked the 2 questions in this section. Here is the third party story. And so you begin with a provocative statement that presents a real problem, right? As the introduction. That presents a real problem. And then they're going to go, what? Remember, you ask them, how long does the contractor guarantee his or her work for? And then how long does the average manufacturer guarantee their work for? And then you tell them the answers if they didn't know. And then go, okay, that sounds fine. And then you go, well, actually, that presents a real problem. What do you mean? For example, we had a customer who, prior to remodeling her bathroom, had a contractor come out and install a fiberglass tub and a fiberglass wall system. 2 years after the tub was installed, it cracked. Remember I talked how a fiberglass tub is porous? Also, sometimes they have that tendency to crack. Well, that's exactly what happened. So the customer called the general contractor and said, now here we're quoting them, right? We didn't just say she called them, and then we quote her. Remember me. About 2 years ago, you installed this tub for me and cracked. What do I do? The contractor said, well, I don't know. I recommend you call the manufacturer, see if it's under warranty. So that's exactly what she did. She found the manufacturer's information, picked up the phone, and called them. After getting through to someone, she said the person on the other line looked up the information about her tub and said, "You're in luck. Our records show that tub has a 3-year warranty and you've had it for just a little over 2 years. We'll take care of everything." She said, "That's great," and hung up the phone. Notice how we're quoting them, right? When you do this on a sales call, people are on the edge of their seat. Whether or not they were paying attention before, they're paying attention right now. And then she hung up the phone. She told us that a week later she came home from work, and what do you think was sitting on her front steps? Now, this is like really powerful. So let me just talk about this for a second. When you do this in the home and you tell the story well, you're going to ask them, what do you think was sitting on her front porch? People, you'll look at them, people will smile, they light up like a Christmas tree, and then they're going to say something like, a tub. They'll laugh. They're having a great time. Now, when you think about what just happened there, and if you tell the story right, this will happen every time. You stop talking, and your customer finished your thought and enjoyed it and smiled. That is the highest level of persuasion you or I will ever attain in sales. When else in the presentation do you stop talking, your customer smiles, giggles, and finishes your thought? That's selling. And that's what will happen. And then you'll say, "You're exactly right, a brand new tub." So she called her neighbor over to help her put the tub in the garage. She called the contractor and said, "The tub was under warranty. They sent me a new tub. Can you help me?" About a week later, the contractor came over, ripped out the old tub, disposed of it, put the new tub in. When he finished, do you think he gave her a bill? And they're going to say, "Well, probably, right?" Exactly. So my point, and here's where you apply the meaning. Right? We had a clear conclusion, right? The story ends. There's no unnecessary details hanging out. We understand what happened. We get it. Here's the meaning. My point in sharing that is this. With the limited guarantee in the contractor option, if anything goes wrong, it's the customer that bears the burden for finding the solution and the brunt of the cost. I don't believe that's right. Would you agree? And they'll say, "Yeah, that's not right." It's that easy. It's that powerful. I wouldn't add anything to this story. I wouldn't try to, have the customer dressed oddly or add any crazy details. I would keep it lean, keep it anything distracting removed, and just tell the story exactly how it's written on your screen. Make it easy. I stopped and started during the story, but if you do it right, it's about 90 seconds to 2 minutes, depending on how fast you talk, and your customer is highly engaged. They're finishing your thought, and it's a very persuasive way to show them the problems with the inferior warranties and post-install customer care that you get with this option. Really impactful. So, what I would recommend for all of you listening is practice executing these sections. The goal, obviously, of the cost is to create a strong anchor, right? When you get to that story in the final section, you want to practice telling it so you can tell it, and it's lean, and you have all 5 of the components that we talked about earlier in the story. And I would just memorize the story. Honestly, that's what I would do. Because if I was going out selling, tonight, I would say the story the way it's written. It just works. So I wouldn't try to reinvent the wheel. But once you understand how to create the stories, which we just went over, now you can create additional ones to answer objections and other parts of the presentation that you might encounter some resistance. So stories are a very powerful tool that we can use effectively. So after we go through those 2 sections, then we get to your experience slide. And if you remember, this is where we bring up that buying criteria, right? And we apply it to this option to kill it. So the buying criteria, we've talked a lot about this. This is what helps our customers make these active commitments. And we did this in the inspection, a lot of great training in past webinars and in the virtual learning on this that you can reference. But let's talk about how do we deal with it in the contractor option. First, remind them of it. You say, when we were in your bathroom a few moments ago, we talked about how for anything to be a solution for you, you said you needed to accomplish a few different things. And then we want to use their words. Remember the four things we want to focus on: solving the functional problems, improve the design of the bathroom, we want a hassle-free remodeling process, and we wanted a great experience after the install. And we want to show them that this option doesn't meet any of those things. So how do we do that? You say something like this. The first thing you mentioned to me was that you wanted to permanently solve the water damage issues you have in your bathroom, the grout around the tile that was moldy, and that severe staining in your tub, right? So cite their problems. Do you think this option with those porous products will permanently solve those issues for you? And if they're paying attention, they're going to say, well, no, it wouldn't. Okay. Second, you mentioned that you wanted a design style that was consistent and looked great. Do you think this option, with the very limited design guidance you'd receive, will give you a bathroom you'll be proud of for years to come? Well, no, I'd be designing it myself. Like we talked about, I don't know how to do that. Okay. Another thing you told me that is you wanted the remodeling process to be quick. You didn't want your bathroom tied up for weeks at a time, you said, and hassle-free. Because this option stretches out the remodeling process and will cause, whatever pain you found, your bathroom to be tied up for, well, weeks at a time, or having someone in and out of your house for weeks at a time, it doesn't sound like this is a good option and that'll work for you. Will it? And not really. No, we've talked about it a few minutes ago. I hate the amount of time it would take. Okay. Finally, you said you wanted products that wouldn't deteriorate soon after they were installed, and if there was ever an issue, that someone would stand behind the products and assist you. Do you think this option, with its limited guarantee, will really give you that peace of mind? And they're going to say, well, no. If anything goes wrong, like that lady you told me about, I mean, I'm on my own, right? And you can see how the presentation beautifully walked through 5 things that equip them to answer all these questions and to identify this option doesn't work for them. So now what we do is we go in and we ask for the commitment. It sounds like this option really doesn't meet any of the requirements you said you wanted for your bathroom. Is that correct? And they're going to say, well, no. So can we remove this option from consideration? Okay, right? And so it's very simple. Now let's play hardball. Let's say you get someone that's pretty tough, which is, I'd say, under 5% of people, and they go, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't like it, but I don't know what something better costs. I mean, I'm assuming rebath is better. I don't know what it costs. So, I mean, I don't want to do this, but if I have to, I will. Okay, I understand cost is a concern. I get that. Other than cost, would you ever want to pursue this option that doesn't meet any of the things you said you wanted for your bathroom? Well, of course not. Okay, fair enough, right? I isolate on cost and I get the commitment. We're going to address costs later on when we get into rebath. So I don't want that to ever stop me from getting a commitment, but I want a commitment here. If not, I have a problem. If they won't commit to this, guess what else they're not going to commit to? The sale, right? So how do you negate the objection at the close of, I want to get other bids? Right here. Right here. You fight it right now. Don't fight it at the close. Fight it right now. Why wait? Right at the close, you're not equipped to handle it. Here you are. And if you do a good job, this is an easy one to get a commitment to, right? And so between this webinar and the last one, we've walked through the entire contractor option. And if you present it the way it's executed, you're going to get strong commitments almost every time. And if you don't get a strong commitment, you can address that and handle it. And if for some reason, let's say you can't get a commitment, they just won't do it. Find out why. The good news is you have the rest of the presentation to, present new information and go back for the commitment, right? You're not at the close yet. You got a lot of time. So that time is now your friend. At the close, it's not your friend. You don't have much time. You have minutes. Here, you have a lot of time. You have the next option, then rebath, then design to give new information and kill this if you can't. But the vast majority of the time, you're going to be able to kill the contractor option right here. So as an exercise, this screen right here, I'd recommend you leverage as you practice. Why? It walks you through how to introduce it, the 4 things you want to accomplish, and then the verbiage to use at the end of guiding them and killing the contractor option. So if I'm learning this for the first time, what I would do is have this screen in front of me, and then I would practice it. And then eventually I would take it away and keep practicing it and use it as a learning tool, right? So you want to eventually be able to do it without any prompts. But as I'm learning it, let's say I'm learning it by myself today, because why wait to be great? If I'm weak in this, I want to fix it, like right now, or right after this webinar. I would use the slide, use it as a prompt, practice, think of some scenarios, practice it, saying it out loud, and then eventually by 20, 30 minutes, move this away, keep practicing, and in an hour, hour and a half, I'm done. And I got it. And it's rock solid, and I can start using it immediately to boost my sales. So leverage this slide, practice the contractor section, and then practice that buying criteria so you're really good at it, because this is our number one competitor. That's similar to us, right? And it's not the status quo doing nothing, which is our biggest competitor, nothing. And after that, it's the contractor. So you really want to get good at this, and that'll negate a lot of the other bids objections. So with that, we have a few minutes left in our time together. If you have any questions, feel free to pass them to Wendy, and then she will pass them to me, and I'll read them out, and we will address your questions. So if you have any of those, please submit those in the chat right now. And while we're waiting for the first question to come in, I will answer a question that I've been asked a number of times regarding this, in that how long does it take to usually learn all this? So the cost section, the post-install care section, and then the buying criteria at the end of the contractor. Doesn't take long. You have those slides to prompt you. So memorizing the story is the longest portion. But if you can devote, I would say, 3 hours to this, you can master it. And so what does that 3 hours look like? It looks like, maybe watching this part of the webinar again, or leveraging some of the virtual learning so you understand what to do, looking at the script. And then the majority of the time, you want to practice saying it out loud, and either recording it or saying it to a colleague or a friend or a spouse or your manager or whoever, and get them to give you feedback. And so and if you don't have anyone who can give you feedback, record yourself, listen to it, critique yourself, make changes, adapt, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again, and use that process. You got to get feedback. So none of us get this by just reading a script or watching a webinar. You have to practice it out loud. You have to do that. So one other question that we have is, how important is this to successfully closing sales? And this section is really important, the contractor option. This sets you up for rebath really powerfully, meaning the contractor option, all 5 of the points we address, we are the exact opposite. And so the better you can present here and get commitments that they don't want this, the more effectively you will be when you present rebath, because they'll be able to perceive high levels of value, right? Because you prepare them. So if you want to improve the rebath section, the first thing you can do is get good at the contractor. It'll help them see the contrast. And so when you talk about how we remodel, our installers are quick and efficient, they're like, well, that sounds awesome, because the contractors take weeks, and I don't want that. And right, so you help them see value. So the better you are at the contractor, you can really set yourself up for success in the rebath section. So we'll see if we have any other questions that come in. We'll give another minute or so to do this. And as we're waiting, we have a question come in here, and it is how to battle cost if someone has a quote already. Well, that's a good question. So let's say they've talked to one of our competitors, they've already gotten a quote, and so that is their anchor, right? That they're going to compare you to. And we are often not the least expensive option, right? So oftentimes our competitors will underbid what we are. So what do you do with that? You got to reframe that. So you have to make sure they understand it's not an apple to an apple. Because if you have 2 apples sitting in front of you and you want to buy an apple, one is $1, one is $2, they look exactly the same, you're going to choose the dollar apple. Why would you spend an extra dollar? It wouldn't make any sense. So what you have to do is identify, where am I different? What is my point of differentiation with this competitor, whoever it is? So they say, I got a quote from Bath Fitter. Okay, so I want to look for what we call distinct value. What is distinct value? It's in a way that I am different from, in this case, Bath Fitter or whoever, that they care about. And I might have to help them care about it, right? So how am I different? And how do I justify that difference to help them want to pay more for that difference? And so that matters quite a bit. So I looked for distinct value. So if they say, I got a quote from Bath Fitter for $7,200, okay? Put whatever competitor you want in there in place of Bath Fitter if that's not a major competitor for you. For many, it is, so we'll just go with it. And your price is 10 grand, okay? So there's a big difference there of $2,800. So how do I justify that? I have to talk about what kind of value am I going to give that Bath Fitter is not, to justify that, right? But the good news is I know what my anchor is. It's 7,200. So now I have to adjust, I have to build more value and adjust their anchor. So they go, yeah, Bath Fitter is 7,200. You're 10 grand, but you give me this, this, and this, and that is worth the extra $2,800. So now it's about repositioning of value. So some really helpful tools for that. I'll give you a couple. Number one is in our virtual learning on, dealing with competitors, right? You want to watch those videos. It'll walk you through exactly how to do what I just said. And if you really want to get nasty good at this, check out our virtual learning on reframing. This took about 3 years to develop the reframing process. It's only 5 videos. One of the videos is an example on how to think about an objection, how to reframe it. It's got 4 simulations. It is awesome. I shared this with one of the professors at Harvard Business School, and the graduation happened, but in April and May, he was sharing it with all the graduating MBA students, this reframing process that you have access to in the virtual learning. So check it out. It is really powerful, and it gives you a model, a step-by-step model to reframe anything. I mean, you name it, professionally and personally. It is awesome, right? And you can reframe anything, and it gives you, because the key with reframing is, and one of the things the research bore out, it's really fascinating, is oftentimes you have to reframe more than once. You have to do it back to back, right? And so we have a model we created, and that I wish was done earlier, because I would have put it in the Science of Selling, my book. I have another book coming out with Penguin Random House in 2020. It will definitely be in there, and because it is really powerful. People that have learned it call it like a Jedi mind trick. It is really, really powerful. So I'm still, everything I've said about this is underselling it. I mean, check it out. It'll be a wise investment of 40 minutes of your time. It'll show you how to reframe any idea. And in sales, that's the name of the game. Great salespeople are great at reframing. And this process will help you get great in about 40 to 45 minutes. So check that out. But check out those resources, and that'll help you really. How do you battle a competitor who's priced less than us? How do you present more value so you can get that sale and charge a premium price for the premium products and service that we deliver? So excellent. Any other questions here? I know we have just a minute or two left. All right. It looks like that was our one question. So thank you so much to all of you for your time today and for your attentiveness during the webinar. Check this out, and check out our webinars every single month and the great library of webinars that we've done over the last, I think it's about a year right now, on many different topics, many different parts of the sales process. So thank you so much. And remember, the key with everything we've learned today is execution. What are you going to do with this information? So I would start working on it. If it's a weakness for you, work on it immediately. Put the time in. Why wait to be great? And when you do that, success is right around the corner. So thank you so much for your time. With that, we will end the webinar. Thanks especially to Wendy for hosting and putting this on. And we will talk soon. Thank you so much.